Fernanda Oliveira was in her office, located at the back of her luxury restaurant, a jewel in the culinary crown of Guadalajara. The glass walls of the office offered a view of the main dining room, where every detail, from the linen tablecloths to the polished silverware, reflected the standard of excellence set by Fernanda. She was widely recognized as a visionary in the culinary world, not only for her exceptional skill as a chef, but also as a savvy businesswoman who had turned her restaurant into a distinguished destination. As the chef and owner of the most prestigious luxury restaurant in Guadalajara, Fernanda had earned considerable admiration and respect in the world of haute cuisine. Her restaurant, an elegant establishment situated in the heart of the city, was a reflection of her passion for cooking and her unwavering commitment to quality. Renowned for her innovative skills and meticulous attention to detail, Fernanda stood out as both an artist and a businesswoman. She leaned back in her office chair, an elegant piece that sharply contrasted with the memories of her humble beginnings. Fernanda remembered when she was a teenager, feeling her stomach rumble as she walked through the narrow, bustling streets of her neighborhood in Guadalajara. Her parents had died when she was 1 year old, and she was raised by her grandfather, a man named Antonio. He did what he could, but often the money barely covered basic needs, and there were days when the pantry was nearly empty. There were also times when he couldn't pay the household's basic bills. One such night, when dinner was little more than a thin broth, Fernanda felt disheartened. Sitting at the table with their plates already empty before them, she looked at her grandfather and said in a low voice, "Grandpa, will it always be like this? Will we always face hardships?" Her grandfather took her hands in his, warming them gently. "My dear, I know it's hard now, but you must believe that things will get better," he began, looking firmly into her eyes. "Life tests us in ways we sometimes can't understand, but it's our effort and our hope that guide us through tough times. You need to strive, study, and dream. One day you'll see that your efforts were worth it." Inspired by her grandfather's words, Fernanda began to dedicate more time to her studies, especially cooking, which became her great passion. She spent hours in the kitchen with her grandfather, learning not just how to cook but how ingredients could be combined creatively to create dishes that were more than the sum of their parts. "Each dish you prepare tells a story, Fernanda, never forget that," he instructed her as he guided her through family recipes and his own inventions. From a very young age, Fernanda was interested in the kitchen, a space of creation and discovery that became the setting for her most precious learning. Her grandfather, a skilled cook with decades of experience, was her first and most influential teacher. In the afternoons after school, while other kids ran off to play soccer or ride their bikes, Fernanda hurried home, eager to learn what her grandfather had to teach her that day. The modest kitchen of their home was her kingdom, where every ingredient had its place, and every recipe its story. You need to know how to handle a knife, how to season correctly, and how to measure ingredients. Cooking is an art, but also a science, he explained, guiding Fernanda's small hands as they chopped vegetables or mixed spices. "Why do we choose this amount of salt, Grandpa?" Fernanda would ask, always curious, as she watched closely. "Because, my dear, cooking is like weaving a delicate fabric of flavors. Each pinch of salt can transform a dish, just as each word can tell a different story," he replied, teaching not only culinary techniques but also the power of small details. These early lessons in the kitchen formed the foundation of Fernanda's love for cooking. "You're becoming a true chef," her grandfather would praise, seeing Fernanda's progress. He knew that these skills would one day be her salvation, a means to change her life forever. "Remember, cooking can nourish more than just the body, it can feed the soul and bring people together," he often said. These words resonated in Fernanda's mind, a constant reminder that her passion for cooking had the power to transform not just ingredients into dishes, but also her own life. One day, Fernanda came home after a long day at school. The anticipation of seeing her grandfather and sharing the day's adventures filled her heart with joy. She had scored high on a math exam and was eager to tell him, knowing it would make him proud. "Grandpa, I'm home," she shouted, expecting to hear his usual response, a warm "I'm in the kitchen, dear," always accompanied by the smell of something delicious being prepared. But there was no response. The silence was unsettling, and a wave of worry swept over her heart. She dropped her backpack on the floor with a dull thud and quickly walked through the small house, calling again, "Grandpa, are you here?" Still no answer. She went to the kitchen. Nothing. Everything was as he normally left it before lying down for an afternoon nap, but there was no sign of him. With her heart beating faster, Fernanda went to his room, her worry growing with each step. She gently touched the door. "Grandpa, is everything okay?" Hearing nothing, she slowly opened the door. The room was dim, the curtains closed to block the afternoon sun, but the soft light revealed her grandfather lying in bed, apparently sleeping. "Grandpa," she called softly, approaching the bed. His face was peaceful, almost as if he were simply in a deep sleep, but something in the air was wrong, a stillness that was more than just sleep. With trembling hands, Fernanda touched his arm, cold and motionless. "Grandpa, please wake up," she whispered, her heart tightening with a terrible premonition. The reality of what was happening began to settle in, and she realized he wasn't breathing. A wave of panic hit her, and she ran to get the phone to call emergency services, her voice trembling as she spoke to the operator. The following minutes were a blur of activity, with paramedics arriving and confirming what Fernanda had already feared: her grandfather had passed away, a victim of a heart attack while sleeping. Now, only after the paramedics had left, Fernanda sat beside the bed, holding her grandfather's still hand between hers, tears freely flowing down her face as she whispered words of gratitude and love, memories of all the moments they shared together flooding her mind. "You always told me to be strong, to keep trying no matter what," she spoke to the silence of the room, each word an effort to maintain composure. "I will try, Grandpa, for you." That night was one of the longest of her life. Sitting in the kitchen, surrounded by her grandfather's recipes and utensils, Fernanda felt the weight of the world on her shoulders. She had already lost her parents and now her grandfather, the last family member she had. The loneliness was crushing, but deep down she knew she had to honor his memory. She decided that no matter how difficult it would be, she would move forward, using his teachings as her guide. Fernanda got up early every morning, determined to find a job that could support her and help her follow in her grandfather's footsteps in the kitchen. At 17, she knew her options were limited, but her passion and skill in the kitchen gave her hope. She prepared several simple and straightforward resumes, highlighting her kitchen experience learned from her grandfather, and walked through the streets of Guadalajara, entering every restaurant she found along her way. At the first restaurant, a small, cozy place, she was greeted with a smile by the receptionist, but upon seeing her age and simple clothes, his expression changed. "I'm sorry, young lady. We're looking for someone with more experience," he said, returning her resume without really looking at it. Fernanda felt a pang of disappointment but thanked him politely and left, trying not to let the rejection shake her determination. She visited several restaurants, but the response was always negative. At each restaurant, the story repeated: disdainful looks, forced smiles, and quick responses masking the same message. She was too young, too inexperienced, not what they were looking for. As the day wore on, her heart grew heavier, but she remembered her grandfather's words encouraging her never to give up. At the end of the day, with aching feet and a heavy heart, Fernanda sat on a bench in the square, watching the sunset. She thought about going home, but something inside her refused to give up. "I know I can do this. I just need someone to believe in me," she murmured to herself. Then she noticed a restaurant across the street, a new place that looked different from the others, more modern and welcoming. Taking a deep breath, Fernanda crossed the street and entered the restaurant. She was greeted by a man whose expression was kind and welcoming. "Can I help you?" he asked. Fernanda, her voice a little shaky but full of hope, replied, "I'm looking for an opportunity to work in the kitchen. I learned to cook from my grandfather and, although I'm young, I'm willing to learn and work hard." The man, named Marcos, observed her for a moment, then smiled and said, "Why don't you start by showing me what you can do? We have an open kitchen for testing today. Let's see what you're capable of." That moment was a turning point for Fernanda. Finally, someone was willing to give her the opportunity she had been seeking. She followed the man to the kitchen, her nerves on edge, but her heart full of hope. It was her chance to demonstrate her value and skill, and she was determined to make the most of it. Marcos watched Fernanda as she prepared to cook. The restaurant's kitchen was a new world for her, filled with modern equipment and high-quality ingredients she had only dreamed of using. Marcos, with his apron already stained from the daily battles in the kitchen, was a fatherly figure there, known for his culinary skill and fair, open-minded judgment. He saw not just an awkward young girl in front of him, he saw potential and passion. "So, Fernanda, what will you be preparing for us today?" Marcos asked with an encouraging tone. Fernanda felt a knot of nervousness in her stomach, but her decision was already made. "I will make pasta," she replied, trying to mask her anxiety with confidence. Marcos nodded, smiling slightly, and let her begin her work, watching closely as she chose the ingredients. Fernanda began to prepare the pasta with the care and precision her grandfather had taught her. She knew it was a simple dish, but she also knew that simplicity was often the key to perfection. As she worked, she could feel Marcos's attentive gaze on her every move. She chose fresh tomatoes, garlic, and basil, ingredients that, although basic, could transform a simple pasta into something memorable with the right touch. When Fernanda finished cooking, she served a portion of the dish to Marcos, who awaited her with a neutral expression. The silence as he tasted the dish was almost deafening. Finally, he set the fork down and looked at Fernanda. "Your pasta is simple, yes, but you demonstrated an understanding of flavor balance. That is very important in a cook," he said, and Fernanda could hardly believe his words. "I think, with proper training, you can become an excellent chef," Marcos continued, now with a broader smile. "Are you willing to learn and work hard? That is more important than any sophisticated technique for now." The joy Fernanda felt at that moment was indescribable. She nodded vigorously, words escaping her, "Yes, sir, thank you very much." Marcos gave her an affirmative nod and continued, "Starting tomorrow, you will begin as a kitchen assistant. I will teach you everything I know, but remember, Fernanda, the kitchen requires passion and patience. If you maintain that, there is no limit to what you can achieve." With a mix of gratitude and excitement, Fernanda promised to give her best. That day, as she left the restaurant, not only did the night fall over Guadalajara, but also a new chapter in her life began. All thanks to the faith Marcos had placed in her. At Marcos's restaurant, Fernanda began her journey as a kitchen assistant but quickly started absorbing knowledge that went beyond her initial duties. Marcos, with a mix of rigor and patience, began teaching Fernanda advanced culinary techniques essential for any successful chef, from precise vegetable cutting to complex low-temperature cooking methods. Every lesson was a revelation for Fernanda, who dedicated herself completely to learning. As weeks turned into months, Fernanda began to take on more significant responsibilities. Marcos entrusted her with the task of preparing the main course during a busy dinner service, a true test of her skills and ability to handle pressure. With steady hands and surprising calm, Fernanda coordinated the kitchen team, distributing tasks and ensuring every dish was perfect. Marcos watched closely, a discreet smile of approval forming on his lips as he saw the young chef in action. After the service ended, Marcos approached Fernanda, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You did very well today, Fernanda. You have a bright future ahead if you keep this up." His words were simple, but to Fernanda, they were a source of immense pride and motivation. She felt that every long hour spent in the kitchen, every moment of doubt or frustration, was worth it. Encouraged by Marcos's support and her colleagues, Fernanda continued to develop her skills, with every day in the kitchen being an opportunity to learn something new. She began experimenting with flavors and techniques, combining the traditional knowledge her grandfather had passed on with the innovations she was learning at the restaurant. This balance between the old and the new not only enriched her own culinary art but also contributed to the restaurant's menu, bringing freshness and excitement that customers loved. 3 years had passed since Fernanda started working at Marcos's restaurant. During this time, she transformed from an unsure young apprentice into a confident, skilled, and respected chef by her colleagues and by Marcos himself. Now, at 20, she felt it was time to expand her horizons and seek new opportunities to grow even further in her career. The decision to go to culinary school in Mexico City began to take shape in her mind, fueled by the desire to explore new challenges and deepen her culinary knowledge. On a quiet afternoon, after the end of the service at the restaurant, Fernanda found Marcos in the small back room where he usually did the accounting and planned the menus. "Marcos, can I talk to you?" "It's important," Fernanda began, hesitantly. Marcos looked at her with a curious expression and nodded for her to continue. "I've been thinking a lot about my future, and I've decided I want to go to culinary school in Mexico City. I think it's the next step I need to take to really become the chef I want to be," Fernanda explained, trying to contain the anxiety in her voice. Marcos observed her for a moment, his eyes measuring the conviction in her words. "Fernanda, I always knew this day would come. You are talented and have a passion that cannot be limited to this place," he said, with a mix of pride and melancholy. "But you know this is a big change, right? Mexico City is a huge place, and life there can be very different from what you're used to here." "I know, I'm prepared for it. Or at least trying to prepare," Fernanda replied, showing a maturity that even surprised herself. "I've been saving part of what I earn here and did some research. There are challenges, of course, but there are also many opportunities to learn and grow. I want to be among the best and, for that, I need to step out of my comfort zone." Marcos nodded, understanding the determination of the young woman he had helped shape. "I will support you, Fernanda. You have all my support. I will miss you here every day, but part of being a mentor is knowing when to let your apprentice fly, and you, my dear, are ready to fly." The following weeks were a whirlwind of preparations. Fernanda spent nights studying for the entrance exams while spending her days at the restaurant, absorbing all the knowledge she could from Marcos and the other chefs. On Fernanda's farewell day, the restaurant was quieter than usual, the atmosphere heavy with emotion. Marcos called Fernanda to a quiet corner, away from the kitchen's hustle and bustle, which was still preparing the last dishes of the day. Marcos began his gentle but firm gaze on Fernanda. "Today is a big day. Fernanda is leaving for a new chapter in her life, something I always knew was destined to happen. Remember to take not only what you've learned about cooking but also about life. Believe in yourself as I believed in you and never stop seeking excellence." Fernanda, holding back tears, replied with a trembling voice, "Marcos, I wouldn't have gotten this far without you. You believed in me when few did, taught me not only to cook but to love the kitchen and respect every ingredient, every process. That's something I will carry with me always, in every dish I prepare. You showed me what it is to be a true chef, but more importantly, what it is to be a great person. I promise to do everything I can to honor that trust and keep growing. I will never forget where I come from and the opportunities you gave me. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart." Marcos placed his hand on Fernanda's shoulder, his eyes also filled with tears. "Fernanda, I always knew you were special since that first day you walked into the kitchen with a determined look and an open heart. You will do wonderful things, I am sure. And whenever you feel doubt or fatigue, remember where you started and how many challenges you have already overcome. You will always have a home here and a mentor who will continue to encourage you, no matter where you are. Now go and show the world what you are capable of." With one last strong and meaningful hug, they said their goodbyes. Fernanda left with Marcos's words resonating in her mind, ready to face the challenges of culinary school and beyond, strengthened by the unconditional support of the man who had transformed her from a curious young girl into a promising chef. After arriving in Mexico City, Fernanda immersed herself in her culinary studies, determined to absorb all the knowledge the school had to offer. Her passion and dedication did not go unnoticed, and soon she began to stand out among her peers. Not only did she excel in practical and theoretical classes, but she also began to win awards in culinary competitions, establishing herself as one of the promising talents in the gastronomic scene. Over time, her talent caught the attention of several renowned restaurants that invited her to work with them. Fernanda accepted some of these offers, seeking to gain experience in different environments and culinary styles. This phase of her career was intense and enriching, allowing her to refine her skills further and develop a unique vision for her future business. Eventually, after 4 years of learning and practical experience, Fernanda felt it was time to fulfill her most ambitious dream, to open her own restaurant. Driven by the desire to return to her roots and contribute to the community that had seen her grow, she decided to establish her business in Guadalajara. She bought a plot of land and built her restaurant from scratch, a project that reflected both her personal journey and her culinary vision. However, as her restaurant took shape, Fernanda felt the absence of a crucial person in her life, Marcos. She wanted to share her success with him, the mentor who had so greatly influenced her path. But when she tried to find him, she discovered that his restaurant had closed and he had moved out of the city. No one knew his current whereabouts. Though disappointed, Fernanda understood that life often takes unexpected paths and that she needed to continue following hers. Over time, Fernanda's restaurant became a success. Not only did it bring innovation and new life to Guadalajara's culinary scene, but it also became a meeting point for food lovers from all over the world. The restaurant's success consolidated Fernanda's reputation as a top-tier businesswoman and chef, fulfilling the promise she had made to herself and her dear mentor, Marcos. One sunny morning, as Fernanda arrived at her restaurant, she noticed a street girl sitting on the opposite sidewalk. The girl, poorly dressed and dirty, showed a determined air as she offered her sweets to passers-by who rarely paid her any attention. Fernanda's heart tightened at the sight, remembering her own struggles in childhood. She crossed the street, approaching the girl with a kind smile. "Hello, what's your name?" Fernanda asked, squatting down to the girl's eye level. "My name is Gabriella," the girl replied, looking curiously at Fernanda with her big, tired eyes. "Hello, Gabriella. I have a restaurant right across the street. Would you like to come in and eat something? You must be tired from being out here all day," Fernanda offered, gesturing towards her restaurant with a nod. Gabriella hesitated for a moment, visibly surprised by the offer, but then a small smile formed on her dirty face. "I would like that very much, ma'am." "Thank you," she said, her voice almost a whisper. Fernanda guided Gabriella into the restaurant, signaling to her staff that everything was okay. They headed to a discreet table near the kitchen, where Fernanda asked one of the cooks to prepare something warm and nutritious for the girl. As they waited, Fernanda watched Gabriella, who looked around with a mix of admiration and curiosity. When the food arrived, a plate of well-seasoned rice and chicken, Fernanda watched as Gabriella ate with an appetite that only genuine hunger could produce. The girl ate methodically, savoring each bite as if it were the first decent meal she had had in days. Fernanda felt a pang of emotion seeing the girl eat, remembering when food was a luxury in her own life. Noticing that Gabriella had finished her meal and seemed a bit more comfortable, Fernanda decided to take the moment to get to know the young girl who seemed to carry the world's weight on her shoulders. "Gabriella, tell me a little about your family. Do you have siblings, or is it just you and your parents?" Fernanda asked kindly, trying to establish a friendly conversation. Gabriella put the fork aside the now empty plate and took a deep breath before answering. "It's just me and my father now. My mother, she passed away some time ago," said the girl, averting her gaze to the table, avoiding eye contact for a moment. There was an evident sadness in her voice, a clear sign that the loss was still an open wound. Fernanda felt an instant connection, remembering her own pain of losing loved ones. She leaned forward a little more, showing her full attention and empathy. "I'm very sorry to hear that, Gabriella. It must be very hard. How have you both been coping with that?" she asked, her voice full of genuine concern. Gabriella hesitated, clearly thinking about how much she should share about her situation. "Well, it's been difficult. My father has health problems, so he can't work much. That's why I sell sweets, to try and help with the expenses," she finally explained, lifting her eyes to meet Fernanda's, revealing a glimpse of the resilience forced by necessity. "Yes, we moved here not long ago. This is the city where my father grew up. He moved away when he met my mother, and now that she's gone, he decided to come back," the girl revealed, her low voice showing a mix of sadness and acceptance. Fernanda felt a pang of empathy for the young girl before her. "I'm very sorry to hear that, Gabriella. It must have been very hard for both of you. What you are doing is very brave, Gabriella. Taking care of someone we love is one of the noblest acts. But you also need support. Do you have any friends or other relatives here who can help?" "No, it's just the two of us," Gabriella said, a note of loneliness in her voice. She looked at Fernanda with hopeful, uncertain eyes. "Ms. Fernanda," Gabriella began, her voice a little shaky. "I was thinking, my father has been going through really tough times lately. He's very thin and depressed since my mother died, and we've been struggling a lot. The food here smells so good and looks so delicious. Could I bring my father here for dinner? I think that could make him feel a little better." Fernanda, moved by Gabriella's simple and sincere request, felt her heart tighten at the girl's words. She knew how much a hot meal and a welcoming environment could mean to someone facing such hard times. "Of course, Gabriella," Fernanda immediately replied, with a warm and welcoming smile. "It would be an honor to have him here, not just for a meal but to offer a moment of comfort and joy for him and for you. Tell your father he is very welcome here. We will take care of everything to make it a special night." Gabriella was moved, her eyes lighting up a bit. "Thank you very much. My father will be very happy, she replied, the uncertainty mixed with hope in her voice. I want to help, and I think a dinner here would be a good way for your father to feel a bit better and for us to talk. Fernanda spoke sincerely, wanting to convey to Gabriella that she was committed to making a difference in their lives. She continued, and who knows, maybe we can find a way to help you more permanently. What do you think? Gabriella felt a shy smile forming on her face. I think he will like that. My father has been so sad since my mother. Her voice faltered a bit, the memory still fresh and painful. She cleared her throat and continued, since my mother died. Thank you, Miss Fernanda. Don't thank me yet, Gabriella. Let's make this dinner very special for you both. Your father is my special guest. I look forward to seeing you tonight. After that, we will sit down to discuss how we can help more permanently. Maybe there is a way for you to have a more stable income, or maybe we can find a program or community support that can help your father with his health problems, Fernanda explained, already formulating plans in her head. Gabriella seemed almost unable to believe the luck that had changed so quickly. I will talk to him tonight, she said, her voice full of emotion. I think he will be very happy. Fernanda felt satisfied. Excellent. Tell him we are looking forward to having you both. And Gabriella, this is just the beginning. We will find a way to make sure you both have what you need. That's a promise. The girl felt her eyes shining with unshed tears of relief and gratitude. She picked up her small box of sweets, now nearly empty, and with one last wave to Fernanda, left with a new sense of hope. Fernanda, for her part, watched the girl walk away, feeling a weight of responsibility but also a deep sense of purpose. When Gabriella reached the street where she and her father lived, he was reading a book and was surprised by his daughter's enthusiasm. Dad, I have news, Gabriella began, trying to bring some joy to an environment full of difficulties. He lifted his eyes, a glimpse of curiosity passing over his thin, worn face. The loss of his wife had left deep scars, not only emotional but also physical, as he had fallen into severe depression and struggled to find reasons to smile. What is it, my dear? He asked, with a weak but encouraging voice. Gabriella sat next to him and explained, Today, a lady who owns a restaurant on the street where I sell sweets invited me in and gave me a very tasty meal. Moreover, she invited you to dinner tonight there with her. She wants to help us, Dad. She said that after dinner we could talk about how she can help us more. Observing her father's reaction closely, for a moment a slight smile touched his lips, something rare since his wife's death. That's wonderful, Gabriella. Do you think she is sincere? The concern was evident in his voice, a product of years dealing with empty promises and the hardships brought by his late wife's drug addiction, which had led the family to misery. I think so, Dad. She seemed very kind and her restaurant is very beautiful and well kept. She treated me with a lot of kindness, Gabriella said, trying to convey some hope to her father, who needed it so much. She said she would like to meet you. He sighed, a mix of hope and hesitation in his eyes. It would be good to receive some help, wouldn't it? Maybe this could be a new beginning for us, Gabriella. I would like to try for you, he murmured, finally allowing himself to feel a bit of the optimism Gabriella brought. The idea of leaving this depressive routine and the constant struggle to survive seemed like a distant dream, but maybe, just maybe, it could start to become a reality. Gabriella hugged her father, feeling the fragility of his body in her arms. Everything will be okay, Dad. We will go to this dinner together and see what happens. I promise to be by your side, no matter what, she said, strengthened by the possibility of finally offering her father a glimpse of the happiness he so deserved. That night, as the lights of Guadalajara began to twinkle under the starry sky, Gabriela and her father walked slowly down the street leading to Fernanda's restaurant. His heart beat with a mix of nervousness and uncertainty. He looked at his simple, worn clothes, feeling inadequate to enter such an elegant place. Gabriela noticed her father's insecurity and took his hand, offering him an encouraging smile. "Dad, everything will be fine. The restaurant owner is very kind, you'll see," she said, trying to calm his fears. He sighed, trying to gather courage. "I just don't want you to feel ashamed of me, Gabriela," he murmured, his voice trembling. Gabriela squeezed his hand tighter. "Dad, I would never feel ashamed of you. You are the best father in the world. Let's go, she will help us," the girl affirmed with conviction, guiding him confidently towards the restaurant's entrance. As they approached the door, they saw Fernanda greeting some guests with a warm and genuine smile. Gabriela gently pulled her father forward and said, "Hello, Miss Fernanda," finally reaching the entrance. Fernanda turned at the sound of Gabriela's voice and smiled at the sight of the girl. "Gabriela, it's so good to see you here. And this must be..." Fernanda began to say, expecting to be introduced to Gabriela's father, but her words trailed off as her eyes met his. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. "Marcos?" she murmured, incredulous, recognition flooding her expression. Marcos, equally surprised to recognize the woman before him, felt his heart race. "Fernanda? Fernanda Oliveira," he replied, his voice laden with a mix of surprise and a trace of joy. The two looked at each other intently, memories of years ago, of a bustling kitchen, shared laughter and lessons, returning in an emotional whirlwind. "Gabriela, did you know about this?" Fernanda finally asked, her voice trembling as she still tried to process the revelation. Gabriela, confused by the sudden change in atmosphere, shook her head. "No, ma'am, I didn't know you knew each other," she said, looking from one to the other, trying to understand the situation. Marcos stepped forward, a tear rolling down his cheek as he looked at Fernanda, the student who had become a master, now standing in front of him in her own restaurant. "Fernanda, I had no idea this was your place. Gabriela just told me the owner wanted to help us," he explained, his voice choked with emotion. Fernanda quickly composed herself, extending her arms to hug Marcos, a gesture of reunion and reconciliation. "Marcos, it doesn't matter how you got here, I'm just happy you came. Let's sit down and talk, there's so much to catch up on," she said, guiding them into the restaurant, where the past and present promised to intertwine in ways neither of them could have foreseen. As Marcos and Gabriela entered the restaurant, Fernanda gently guided them to a reserved table, away from the bustle of other diners, providing a quieter, more personal space for them. As they walked, Marcos looked around, noting the luxury and style of the place compared to the small restaurant where he had once taught Fernanda. The memory of that time, when the roles were reversed and he was guiding her through the culinary world, brought a wave of emotion. He felt very proud to see how beautiful Fernanda's restaurant was. Marcos sat down, a bit nervous about the situation, his heart beating fast. He discreetly wiped away a tear that threatened to fall, moved to be there, in such an elegant place, as Fernanda's guest. "I never imagined," he began, his voice trembling with emotion, "that one day I would come to your restaurant like this. You have achieved so much, Fernanda." Fernanda, noticing Marcos's nervousness and emotion, offered him a reassuring smile. "Marcos, I owe everything to you. Without your early lessons and belief in me, I wouldn't be where I am today. I'm so happy to have you here," she said sincerely. She sat across from him, her eyes reflecting both the joy of the reunion and the concern for his condition. Seeing you overcome so many difficulties and still follow your dream, that inspires me, Fernanda confessed. Marcos, looking at his hands clasped on the table, continued, but I fell on hard times after we lost touch. Life has been a constant struggle since then. Fernanda listened attentively, her face showing growing concern. I'm so sorry for everything that happened, Marcos. I wish I could have been there, helped somehow. But now that we're together again, I want to do everything I can to support you and Gabriella, she said, her determination clear in every word. Marcos looked at her, forming a fragile smile. Thank you, Fernanda. Just being here today, being treated with such kindness by you, is more than I could ask for. It makes me believe that there is still hope for us. As the soft light of the restaurant enveloped the table in an almost ethereal atmosphere, Marcos began to share his story with Fernanda, who listened attentively to every word, adding a layer to the complexity of the situation he had faced. When I met Gabriella's mother, I was living one of the best moments of my life. I fell madly in love. It was overwhelming, and when she asked me to move to another city with her, I didn't think twice, Marcos began, his voice laden with nostalgia and pain. Everything seemed like a dream until I started to see who she really was and the problems she was hiding. He paused, taking a sip of water before continuing. I didn't know about her drug addiction until it was too late. At first, she hid it well, but then things began to fall apart. She spent everything we had on drugs. I tried to help her, I did everything, but nothing worked. Marcos looked at Fernanda, his eyes reflecting the sadness of years of suffering. Eventually, we lost everything, our home, our resources, our friends. And then, when she died, it was a mixture of grief and relief, because the destructive cycle had finally ended. But it left me alone to deal with the consequences and raise Gabriella. I felt that the only option left was to return to Guadalajara, the city where I grew up. Here, at least, I felt there was an opportunity to rebuild something, to give Gabriella a better life than the one of destruction we had lived. But it hasn't been easy, he admitted, his voice choked with the weight of his experiences. Depression has been a constant companion, Fernanda. There are days when I can barely get out of bed. Gabriella has been my light, my reason to keep going. She is so young but tries to carry the world on her shoulders, and I know that's not fair to her, Marcos concluded, tears beginning to run down his face as he tried to maintain his composure. Fernanda, hearing all this, felt a mix of emotions. Marcos's pain and struggle touched her deeply, evoking not only her empathy but also a strong desire to help. Marcos, thank you for sharing your story with me. I can't imagine how hard it's been for you, but I want you to know you're not alone now. We will find a way to help you and Gabriella overcome this. You both have a future and I will do everything I can to help you reach it, she said, with determination, reaching across the table to hold his hand, a gesture of support and solidarity. Marcos grasped Fernanda's hand, finding some comfort in the warmth and firmness of her grip. He took a deep breath, trying to control the emotions threatening to overwhelm him completely. Fernanda, your words mean more to me than you can imagine. I feel so lost, so broken. Having someone reach out like this is more than I expected when we returned to Guadalajara, he said, a mix of gratitude and despair in his voice. Fernanda maintained her firm and understanding gaze on Marcos, reinforcing her promise with palpable sincerity. Marcos, you saw my potential when I was just a girl. I will repay all the good you did for me. You are valuable and deserve more than just days of struggle. Thank you, Fernanda, from the bottom of my heart, he smiled with renewed hope. They had dinner together and then Fernanda's driver took Marcos and Gabriella to a hotel. The next day, Fernanda took Marcos to a clinic for treatment of his health. Upon arriving at the clinic, Fernanda helped Marcos out of the car and accompanied him to the reception. "I will take care of everything, Marcos. You just need to focus on getting better," she said, giving him a comforting hug. In the following months, Marcos underwent intensive treatment that gradually helped him recover not only his physical health but also the emotional strength he had lost. With Fernanda renting a comfortable house for him and Gabriela, and with the girl now attending an excellent school, Marcos began to see a new path opening up before him, a path full of hope and new possibilities. When he felt strong enough, Marcos received an offer from Fernanda that sealed his new stage in life. During a dinner at Fernanda's restaurant, she said, "Marcos, now that you feel better, I would like to offer you a position here at the restaurant, not just as an employee, but as part of the creative team. You have so much to contribute, and I would love to have your talent and passion as part of our culinary offering." Marcos could barely hold back his tears as he accepted the offer. "Fernanda, returning to work in the kitchen, especially here with you, would be a dream come true. I feel so blessed. Thank you truly for everything." The dinner continued with plans and laughter, a celebration not only of Marcos's rebirth but also of the beauty of a friendship that had endured time and adversity, now strengthened and renewed. Marcos entered Fernanda's restaurant kitchen with a mix of nervousness and excitement. It was his first official day back at work after years of absence due to life's circumstances. The sounds, smells, and bustle of the kitchen seemed to welcome him back to the world he loved so much. The memories of his old culinary skills began to return like old friends, and, with them, a spark of joy he hadn't felt in a long time. Wearing his new apron, Marcos began to review the ingredients for the day's menu, touching each vegetable, herb, and spice with a renewed familiarity. "It feels like I never left," he murmured to himself, a smile forming as he organized his workstation. Fernanda watched from a distance, a satisfied smile on her face as she saw the transformation in Marcos. "Are you ready for the challenge today, Marcos?" Fernanda approached, offering a gesture of encouragement. Marcos nodded, taking a deep breath, absorbing the vibrant energy around him. "I'm more ready than ever. Thank you, Fernanda, for this opportunity to rediscover my passion," he replied, his voice firm with determination. As the service began, Marcos found himself in the middle of the kitchen's frenetic dance, commanding a team for the first time in years. He directed the assistants with clarity and confidence. Each order he gave, each dish he finished rekindled the flame of his culinary talent. It was as if every move reflected not only his technical knowledge, but also a part of his soul that was finally healing. During a break, while the dinner service was in full swing, Marcos allowed himself a few seconds to observe the dining room through the kitchen window. He saw families, couples, and groups of friends laughing and sharing meals. "I'm not just feeding their bodies but maybe also their hearts," he thought, a realization that gave him a new depth in his understanding of the craft. At the end of the service, while the team began to clean up and prepare for the next day, Fernanda approached Marcos with 2 glasses of wine. "You did an extraordinary job today, Marcos." "How do you feel?" she asked, handing him one of the glasses. Marcos looked at the wine, then at Fernanda, and a feeling of gratitude flooded him. "I feel alive, Fernanda, like I'm finally coming home, to myself. There are not enough words to thank you for this," he said, toasting with her. This toast was not just a gesture of celebration for a successful day, but a symbol of Marcos's journey back to life, joy, and passion for cooking. The kitchen had once again become his home, and every dish he prepared was a celebration of his resilience and rebirth. Gabriela, now attending one of the best schools in Guadalajara, watched her father's transformation with a mix of admiration and pride. She herself had evolved from a girl selling sweets on the streets to a promising student, involved in her own passions and studies. Visits to the restaurant after school had become one of the most anticipated moments of her day, not only to see her father in action but also to learn from Fernanda, who had become a friend to her. One day, as the three of them sat talking, Gabriella said, "Fernanda, thank you for everything you've done for us, for believing in my father, for giving me an opportunity to learn and grow. You've changed our lives forever." Marcos, with tears of joy in his eyes, hugged his daughter. "Gabriella, my dear, having you and Fernanda by my side is more than I could ask for. This whole journey, every challenge, and every victory was worth it because we're in this together. I'm so grateful to have you in my life," he said, his voice breaking with emotion. Fernanda, looking at the two of them, felt a wave of contentment and peace. "I just did what was right." Gratitude is a powerful force that motivates us to give our best and give back the good we've received. Seeing you both here, happy and thriving, is the best reward I could have. Everything we've done together here is not just about business or food, it's about restoring lives and hopes. They shared one last laugh and a final toast before preparing to return to the restaurant's routine. And so, what did you think of the story? Don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and share. See you next time. Goodbye.